that's right. And I tend, for my style, I tend to operate more from a servant style leadership. But I want to emphasize there are lots of styles of leadership, and it's again being consistent with who you are. That's why it's called collaborative consultants, because I believe in collaboration is the most powerful tool there is.
Hi, I'm Clayton Carpenter. I'm here with Dave Bice, retired program manager and engineer. Today we're going to talk a little bit about leadership, so welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Clayton. Appreciate it.
How's it going?
It's going really good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So what is leadership as a whole, and why is it so important to leading a program?
Leadership is the key element, it sets the stage for everything. Without leadership, you're just wandering aimlessly. It is the main thing that sets the stage for everything to be executed properly. It's the key thing about leadership is really setting the vision. You have to set a vision for the entire company, developing a plan of action that everyone can gather around and everyone has buy-in into. So a lot of times people try to create a plan in isolation, say, okay, I'm going to go in a closet or in my office, develop a plan and then distribute it to the team and they're going to go figure it out. Worst thing you can do. You really need to develop a plan as a team. Get everyone together, get all the inputs from everybody, then they feel like they're being part of the creative process and it creates the buy-in. And then people get to see what all the relationships are in the plan and what the strategy is in the plan. If you create the strategy in isolation and then you hand it to somebody, they don't know all the thought process that went into that. So by engaging people and in having them build that plan together, then everyone is able to understand what the strategy is, what the difficulties were and some of the decisions that you had to make in developing that plan, and you begin to appreciate it and buy into it. And at the same time, it helps people understand the urgency behind why each of those milestones are so critical to the execution of the company and why those are valuable to the company. If all you see is a bullet on a chart and it says, oh, we're going to do this by this date, you don't really know why that's important. You don't understand what the consequences are about not hitting that date, and you just think, oh, well, it's not even practical, I'm not going to do that. And so then you don't get the buy-in, and then for certain it won't happen. What's critical to the execution is that everyone understands the reason why it's there, the urgency behind it, and they agree that that's an important task. And then people will move mountains to make it happen. And I've seen it happen. When they understand the urgency of what's happening, they'll make it happen. Even if they have to work through the night and do 7 days a week, they'll make it happen. But they won't do that if they don't understand why it's so important for that to happen on that date. So creating that sense of urgency is really, really critical. And then being able to communicate that across the organization. You can't have, if you've got an organization of 400 or 500 people, not everyone can be participating in the development of the plan, but you can have all the leadership involved in the plan. So maybe 20, 30, 40 people that can help participate in that plan. 400 is not practical. So now the critical part is communicating the plan. Having that communication happen over and over again. Repetition is really your friend, because repeating the plan, helping people understand, gets clarity on what are we trying to accomplish. So you cannot overdo communication. You have to constantly communicate with everybody. And it helps provide the validation to folks that, yes, this is the right plan, we're on the right track. And so when you're communicating and they understand the strategy, they understand the intent of what we're trying to accomplish, now they can focus on the real intent. If they don't understand the strategy, they may accomplish the task without really accomplishing the objective. So you might write a document or do something that was planned for, but if you didn't understand the strategy, you might completely miss the mark. So if you're trying to sell something to a customer and you want them to see the end product, and you say, well, I'm going to create that end product as a static article, as an example. Maybe I don't have time to create the whole vehicle or the entire product, so I'm just going to create something that's static and create a presentation. That might completely miss the mark of what you're trying to accomplish in the strategy. So understand the strategy, what's really important, and communicate that to everybody so everyone understands and they can focus strategically on that objective. That's what's really important about communicating that and helping everybody develop the plan in a timely way.
So depending on the program and depending on who's leading that program, each strategy is going to be different.
Absolutely, that's very, very true. So what's really critical about leadership is that we are true to ourselves. If you are trying to be something that you're not, it comes across as phony, it's unbelievable, and you lose credibility with your entire organization. So you have to be true to yourself first and foremost. And I know that sounds like a corny line, to your own self be true, but it's really, really true that you have to be consistent. And then everyone can know who you are, what you're trying to do, and you're not trying to be something that you're not. Because you'll never come across genuine if you do that. So I just want to give you a simple example. I was working with someone one time, I was in a leadership role, training people on program management. And we were in this class, and there were 6 people, they each got to have their own turn in the program management role to experience what it was like to be a program manager. And one day, this woman, it got to be her turn, and she was a very pleasant, very intelligent woman, soft-spoken, very articulate, and during the course of the class, people were really listening to her and understanding her and really respected her opinion. And then it came time for her to be the leader of the group, and she took her turn in the role, and she totally changed her behavior into dictatorial, driving home, trying to say, you gotta do this and you gotta go do that. And she was just totally changed her whole behavior. It was not who she was. And the team didn't know how to react. And this was in just a small setting. It was really fascinating to witness. And at the end of the day, I mean, the team didn't accomplish any of their objectives. And they didn't do anything she had asked. They didn't respond to her at all. Where in the previous sessions, they had really likened to her. But they didn't recognize her as who she had become when she was a leader. And at the end of the class, everybody left and she sat there and she just started sobbing. And I asked her, what's wrong? She goes, I'm a failure at this. I will never be a leader. Can never do this. I hate this. I said, why did you behave differently than who you are? And her simple answer to me was, this is the only way a woman can be a leader. This is how we have to be a leader. And it struck home to me that the difference between men and women are so different in our society right now. And women are trained that they have to be just like other men. And they have to be acting like these tough women who can charge and take charge and lead people. And the only way to do that is to be a dictator. And that is so not true. But it is so true for women to perceive it that way. And the way most men respond to women typically is that they will accept a strong woman, but a more mild woman that's in a leadership role, they tend to disregard. And so there's some real cultural things that we have to overcome. But a woman, well, everyone, not just a woman, but everyone has to be true to yourself. So for women, they tend to try to overcompensate and become somebody that they're really not, because that's what's been expected. And it's not the way that it should be. And so in order for a woman to be effective in her role, and really for anybody to be effective in their role, is for them to be true to who they are. And I simply asked her, I said, why did you become somebody you weren't? And she said, because I thought that's how I have to be. I said, no, you can't be effective if you are trying to be somebody you're not. And so it's such a valuable lesson for us to be so true to ourselves, make sure that we are consistent. If she had been, she would have been so effective because the people in that room would have known who she was and why she was that. Some women are strong and are dictators, and that's great, just be consistent. Some women are not, and the way to be effective is to be consistent with who you are, and that's true with men as well as women. But in our day and age, we tend to hold higher expectations of women in different roles, and if you try to fit that mold and it's not who you are, you will fail. So it's so important for us to be true to who we are, be consistent, and step into that leadership role as being consistent with our personality and what motivates us. And people will respond to that, and you'll be genuine.
And
If
people,
you're not genuine, you won't.
and people trust you a lot easier if you're actually being yourself.
And you can't get anything done without trust. Ultimately, that's where rubber meets the road, is when you are when you are gaining trust with the people that you work with. If people don't trust you, you might as well quit, because it's not going to happen. You're constantly going to be second guessing yourself. You can't do anything without trust. And first and foremost, trust is first of all given before it's received. You have to give trust to get trust. And so, as a leader, you are the one who sets the pace for that. You first have to give trust before you can receive it. And you can't expect people to trust you first thing out of the box. And you have to trust them first. So if you don't trust them, you have died at the starting line. Because if you don't trust the people that you're working with, they're not going to trust you, because you're not even allowing yourself to start. So you have to start out by trusting people first, and then wait for, if something does fail, then you hold people accountable, and you challenge them. And if you let me down, you let them know that they let you down, and you have that honest conversation with them if that happens. So most of the time, if you give trust, you'll be shocked at how much every single time they're going to come through for you. And then eventually you will begin to receive their trust as well. And you have to wait for it. Everybody's on their own timetable. You can't demand that someone trust you. All you can do is wait to receive it. And you have to be constantly giving it of your own. You know, Stephen Covey has a famous line in his book that I really love, and it's, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So it's so important for us to, for me at least, to adopt that philosophy. And before I can gain trust with other people, I first have to understand them and understand who they are. And we shouldn't expect people to understand us before we understand them. That's really kind of arrogant. We should step forward and say, okay, I want to know who you are. What motivates you? What are the things that you like to do? What are you good at? What are you not good at? How can I help you in your role? And then eventually they'll get around to how can they help us. But we shouldn't be first trying to demand that they help us. And I had a quick example of this one where I had a young man come into my office one day and said, I just cannot work with this other group. It's so frustrating. Every time I try to work with them, they keep constantly delaying the deadlines. They stiff arm me every step of the way. I can't get anything done. And I simply recited the Stephen Covey principle. I said, well, just seek first to understand them, and then let them try to understand you. So seek first to understand, then to be understood. So look for and I explained in a little more detail, look for how you can help them, and then they will magically start to help you. And he said, really? I said, yeah. So 2 weeks later, he came into my office. He said, I can't believe this. This is the most magical thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. He said, this is my biggest life lesson I've ever learned. He said, I tried this 7 different times with 7 different people, and it worked every single time, like magic. He said, I cannot believe this works. All I did was try to understand them first, give them a hand with what they were doing, and instantly they were helping me with my stuff. He said, this is so powerful. He said, you just taught me my greatest life lesson ever. And I was on cloud 9, because for someone to learn that way was amazing, and to see him grow and learn was just phenomenal. But I remember that day like it was yesterday, because that was one of my most significant memories in work, was seeing him learn and grow that way through that. And it's such a powerful tool that we so often underestimate. And it's a critical element of working together as a team. And that's all tied up in trust.
And that's what separates you as more of a servant leader versus a dictatorial leader, and someone who probably wouldn't have even ever taken that approach. And if they heard that, they wouldn't have had the gratitude and the realization that you had.
Yeah, I think that's right. And for my style, I tend to operate more from a servant style leadership. But I want to emphasize there are lots of styles of leadership, and it's again being consistent with who you are. So I grew up in a religious upbringing where it was really about being drilled into me about being a servant. And so that's really kind of who I am. I'm here to help others and really honor other people through me. And so that's my style of leadership. And it can be very, very effective. Servant style leadership seeks to put other people's first and show that you care. And it's really important to build that trust by doing it that way. Dictators can be very effective. Hitler arguably was one of the most effective leaders in the world. He was able to mobilize a country from being totally beaten down and in just a few matter of years almost took over the world. If it wasn't for the corrupt and horrific things that he had done, he could be honored really as a miraculous leader. He mobilized a country in ways that no one has ever done in history. But so dictators can be very effective. So I'm not trying to glorify Hitler, but by the same token, you need to understand that servant style leadership provides a very big value of building trust, where dictators tend to oftentimes destroy that trust. So they have to work very hard at showing that they care about people and supporting them while dictating the rules, because that's their style, and saying, okay, I need you to do this, this, and this, and then people go march. But you need to balance that with people who show that they care. So we need to be true to ourselves, but then we also need to surround ourselves with people who balance us, and really good people, strong people, who can balance our weaknesses and our strengths with each other. So that's another important aspect, that if we're understand who we are, if we're a strong dictatorial leader, well, that's fine. But then also know that I need to have people that support me that are on the servant style as well, so that we can balance each other out, because both can be very effective, in leadership roles. You need to understand who you are, be true to who yourself is, and then balance yourself with other people who complement your strengths and your weaknesses.
Once you're in that group, in that collaborative group, you're looking at when, okay, I messed up, you admit your fault and move on. What are the pros of that, and what happens if you don't admit your fault?
If you don't admit your faults, people will see through that, and they will know that you're intimidated, you're not honest about things, you are holding people accountable to a different standard. Nothing can be worse for an organization. It is so good to be open and honest as you hold people accountable to your expectations, that you hold yourself accountable as equally. Nothing is worse than when we say, hey, I'm being held to a different standard than my boss, and that will drive people away from their organization so fast. If you're all being held to the same standard and you show that I'm willing to admit my faults, other people will be willing to admit that they made a mistake. But if they are afraid to make a mistake, then they will hide that information, and they will try to blame other people, and they will try to shift the blame to someone else, and that just destroys organizations. You have to demonstrate as a leader that it's okay to make a mistake. I had a boss one time that I had really screwed up. It cost $10,000 worth of damage. This was in the 1980s, and I screwed up a computer big time by not understanding how it worked properly. Put in a disk drive in and caused a head drive crash, and then I propagated it across 4 different ones. My boss came in and simply said to me, Dave, what did you learn from that? I said, I can tell you exactly how a disk drive smells. I can tell you how to fix it. I can tell you how to make sure it doesn't happen again. He said, good, just make sure you don't do it again. And that was the end of the story. All he wanted to do was make sure I learned something from the process. And that was such a valuable lesson for me in the process. One, not to be afraid that I could make mistakes. Because if you step out and take risks, mistakes are going to be made. And nothing ever gets done of consequence that isn't taken with some amount of risk. So being able to take those risks and know that you're going to fail from time to time is important. But if you're afraid to admit failure, then all you're going to do is blame other people, or you refuse to take those risks, and it will stymie your organization in multiple ways. So by being willing to take ownership of the situation, say, I've made a mistake, it sets the example for others to say, okay, yeah, I made a mistake too, how do we fix it? And everybody works together and learn from the mistakes that we made, and then we will make sure we don't repeat them. And that way we become a learning organization rather than being doomed to repeat all of our mistakes if all we're doing is blaming other people.
So setting that expectation as a leader carries tenfold, probably
It does.
not only across, well, you just told, not only across the project, but across people's career.
It, absolutely. Yeah,
That's
it's
interesting.
critical to understand those aspects and make sure that we set the example for everybody, and then hold people accountable, as ourselves as well as to others.
You remember anything else specifically about that leader that stuck out? If you said something like that, it seems like.
Yeah, he was really, really good at drawing people in to get them to do more than they thought they could do. And what drove that was he was constantly looking at being a learner. He wanted people to learn. And I think that's a very valuable life lesson for all of us, is that we should always be looking for what can I learn from this? Not, oh, I made a mistake and that's bad, or thinking about everything that happens to me is my fault or someone else's fault. Not trying to put blame on things, but to learn from the opportunities that we have in front of us. Everything that happens, in my belief, happens for a reason, and we should be learning from everything that's around us. Constantly learning, all the time. When we stop learning, we might as well be dead. So we should constantly be learning, and he instilled that upon me, that we need to be constantly learning.
So you look to expect that now from organizations, and is that something as a consultant you try to integrate very quickly to the mindset of?
Yeah, you want to be a learning organization. So, and this has been instilled in me through many really good leaders, are ones that really strive to have everybody in their organization as a leader, as a learner. When I was at the Boeing company, they literally paid for people to go to school, anything, as long as you were learning. They didn't care if you went to go do basket weaving, even though that didn't apply. They didn't make baskets at Boeing. They made airplanes. But if you wanted to take basket weaving, that was fine. You were a learner. And anybody who was continuing to learn was going to be a more important and influential employee in their company. So as long as you were learning, you were becoming a better person, and that's the kind of people they wanted there. I thought that was a valuable lesson. I really appreciated that. And it sent a strong message to every employee. We're here to help you learn, and we're willing to pay for it. And they did, and that was impressive. So a lot of people took advantage of that and did lots of extra classes to learn at night or on weekends while they were working there. So, and I had another leader who also would lead his team by saying every month they would read a different book, and they would get together as a team and say, what did we learn from this book? And how can we apply those lessons to our daily work? And every month they had that discussion, and I tried to adopt that in my work as well, as I led teams to make sure everyone was learning. So I would buy books for my team and try to follow that model as well, and encourage people to learn by reading. I think that's very valuable for all of us. You know, and that's another aspect when you have multiple sites. That's what this one leader had. He had 4 or 5 different sites that he had to manage, and they were all dispersed across the country. And his way of helping lead was by pulling everyone together and focusing them on learning and building a kinship between each other, even though they were in different sites. And then he would also focus on all the other sites that he had to support. He would spend more time with them than he would in his home site. So it's really critical for us to be at the other sites more than we are at our home. And that's very hard for a leader, but in order to build that trust and that communication and to understand who they are, we have to live with them for a while. We have to spend our time with them. And so it's important for us to spend more time with those sites that are away from home than with our sites at home. because those bonds build more naturally. So it's important to divide up your time that way, and it's hard as a leader to do that, but it's important.
There's one story you told me about a guy who was working on a project, and you realized that, going back to Boeing being a learning organization, he wanted to do, was it contract law or something along those lines, but he was an engineer.
Yeah.
So how do you advise leaders to do that? How did, you can't just tell people, say, hey, go drop this that you're doing and do something entirely different.
Well, my view of that is, it's consistent with the leadership, is that you want to be a learner. You want everyone to be learning. And you want people to also be consistent with who they are and what their best talents are. So by looking at yourself and what are the things that you do best and things that are energy creating, then it's really important for you to look at those talents that you have within you. And then those may lead you in a totally opposite direction from your current company. And so that example, this guy figured out, even though he was an electrical engineer, that he was really good at building documents that would mutually get people to mutually agree upon. That's what he really loved to do. And in one of my career development discussions with him, I said, it sounds like something lawyers do. And he thought about it for a little bit and said, yeah, you're right. Maybe I should go to law school. And so he did. He went to law school and he became a very successful lawyer. And yeah, he left the Boeing company and stopped doing electrical engineering. But he was pursuing his passion and what he loved to do. And he was getting paid for it. So to society as a whole, we created a better community by doing that. And by doing that, we support our community and we support ourselves and our own company as a result. So I don't think it hurt the company at all. I think it actually promoted it, even though he left the company. He left as a better, more successful, more true to himself person. And those are the kind of people you want to attract, and also the people that you want to support. And so it doesn't matter to me whether they left the company or not. They were actually being true to themselves and creating energy throughout their entire life and being more passionate. That's the kind of people we want to be working with. So that will attract more people that way and create opportunities. So the people, when he left, that opened up a door for someone who was passionate about electrical engineering to now come work as well. So it creates opportunity in multiple ways.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. And I have one thing before we close up.
Yeah.
If there's one leader that sticks out ever as someone that you admire for their leadership, famous or not famous, who would you say?
First one that comes to mind is Lincoln. The famous leader in a very difficult circumstance took on multiple challenges in a very difficult time, that also knew how to catalyze people and constantly learn. And I have always been impressed by his ability to pull people together in a very difficult circumstance and yet get more out of them. So he could be a general at times, but he could also be a servant and servant style leadership, and yet knew how to pull people into various directions.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You can find more on collaborativeconsultants.net and the portal and many other things that are coming up. So thank you for watching. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.